Jithin, welcome to SpeakEasy with Dheeraj Sinha. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Dheeraj.
Amazing. So, Jithin, I want to start at the origins of this story, right? I mean, you started this whole setup, the NGO, about 16 years back, right? And you'll probably still in college, in your education days, when we were all frolicking, had no clue about what our future would hold. So, how did all start? And I mean, we've spoken to people who started an entrepreneurial venture and so on and so forth. But how did it occur to you to get into the development field to start an NGO?
It feels 16 years seems like a long time. It actually feels like yesterday. Uh, it was not something that I had planned for or prepared for, to be very honest, in my life. I first entered a childcare institution for the first time in my life when I experienced, close to a month after I experienced the biggest tragedy of my life, where on my 19th birthday, I was on 5th November 2005. I went for me and a few of my four of my friends went to celebrate my birthday, and there was a tragedy there. One of them lost their lives, and that really threw us all off. We all ended up blaming ourselves a lot for what happened, and obviously we did, whatever we did without parents' permission. There was a lot of guilt involved, and it was a real struggle because for the first time we were trying to deal with a problem, like we caused something which cannot be solved anymore. And that is something that we were really struggling with, and it put life in perspective in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
a month from then is when, for the first time, I entered a childcare institution along with another friend who was there with me. And I remember being inside that and having a profound experience where I knowing that, oh, I want to actually, for the first time in my life, I remember like getting out and not wanting to like, there were active thoughts of killing myself and things like that for a while,
Mm.
and those were not there anymore. And I was, at that time, I was just happy that it was not there, and I knew I want to go back more often. But now looking back, I think what really happened is that when I was there with the children who were actually having struggles, who were much more challenging than mine for years, for a brief moment, I was probably able to not focus on my own challenges and how difficult my life is, and focus on something that was slightly larger than myself. I could,
Mm.
and from that space, a lot of the anxiety went off, but also uh, I was able to kind of unconditionally care for the children there, and I found that very powerful an experience to be able to have. And so in a lot of ways, it was more of a coping mechanism for the challenges that I experienced at my level. But then going forward, it really became, if I'm able to experience this, how can I enable other young people around me also be able to experience that kind of a deep connection? Because I found that very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very touching story. And I believe you started by teaching English. I mean, that was a first stage, and then now you've gone full-fledged holistic development of the child and so on and so forth. Take us through a bit about what the model exactly is, Jitin, and also maybe one or two stories of transformation. I'm sure you have many, but some which are really close to your heart.
No, absolutely. So I think when we started, we were at the end of the day middle class children who really thought that education is going to solve all of the world's problems.
Yeah.
As long as they're able to educate children, they're able to move out of move out of poverty and achieve prosperity. But as we work with children, as we spend more and more time with children, what we increasingly realize is that education is actually a very small part of a broad spectrum of support a child actually requires. We work with a specific demography of children called children in need of care and protection. These are children who do not have a family support system. So, a lot of things that a middle class child or a young middle class person takes for granted is all the different support that they actually receive from their parents, which could be right from nutrition all the way to the values that you have in your life, to the level of support that you have when there's a crisis backing you up, your self-esteem. So many of those things actually come from your parents or the community support system that you have. And children from vulnerable backgrounds do not always have that kind of a support system. So a big realization for us was that we need to, if we're really trying to solve the problem, it's not enough to just work with with education, we need to be able to kind of go beyond education and focus on a lot of the other components also. I think another big revelation that we had in the whole process was this whole idea that a child can end up in a childcare institution either because his father is an alcoholic and is beating up the mother and it's not a safe space for the child, or the mother is going through a mental health crisis, or the family, the main breadwinner is experiencing some kind of a health crisis and is not able to take care of the family anymore. It could be a very broad spectrum of challenges, but at the end of the day, all of these, the core driver of all of these are extreme poverty. Basically,
Mm.
these are children who are coming from extreme poverty, and if you're really trying to solve the problem at its core, what you're trying to solve for is how do we solve for extreme poverty? How do we ensure that children who are coming out of this program do not end up back in poverty again?
Mm.
And poverty has this weird way of, it has a cyclical nature, which is that once you're stuck in it, it's very difficult to get out of it. So
Mm.
the data says that it takes around 7 generations for children living in childcare institutions, or 7 generations of children born in extreme poverty to break out of poverty and earn a mean income. Now, seven
My God.
generations is just a
Yeah.
crazy amount of time. You cannot even imagine. Like, I don't know who my ancestor was 7 generations from now. So there was a lot of. So then the question really was is that, so the fundamental challenge that we thought we could take up was how do we ensure that we are able to enable children to break out of poverty in a single generation? Because it is not impossible. What are the constraints that is required? What are the kind of support that is required to be enabling us to do that? And from there, we identified a social protection system, which is basically uh, what we internally call the MAT prosperity model, which is at different stages in a child's life, what are the points when they can actually fall off their life and fall back into the cycle of poverty, and how do you restrict that? How do you stop them from falling off? So we developed a program that starts from the age of 10 till the age of 28, because there are different trajectory points in the child's life where the child can actually fall off
Mm.
in these points, which is 10 to 13 it's about basic literacy and numeracy. The 13 to 16 it becomes focused a lot more on education achievements. 16 to 18 becomes a lot more focused on getting them ready to enter the real world, get into colleges. 18 to 21, they are first generation learners. Like, actually, one interesting story that I have is one of our children were from a Sri Lankan refugee camp. And she was actually the first person in her entire refugee camp to ever go to college. She went to VIT. So when we actually went there to kind of let her parents know, her father was so happy that he was distributing sweets across the entire refugee camp. It was almost like a celebration there. So uh, the demography that we work with is fundamentally different from the demography that is the children living in low cost housing or slum areas. They are fundamentally better off than the children that we work with. So they need
Mm.
support at varying times. So even at 21, helping them get into the first job, helping them progress in their first job, and helping them start having their own savings behavior, that becomes a priority.
Mm.
From 24 to 26, the priority becomes who do you get married to? Is that, can you ensure that it's a non-toxic relationship? How do you kind of
Mm.
move for, how do they become truly your partners? Becomes another big priority. And finally, 26 to 28, we have two priorities. One is to kind of ensure that the children, they have experienced a lot of adverse childhood experiences. They have experienced toxic behaviors from their own parents. How do you not transfer that to your own children? Because, you tend to repeat those patterns. So what is the kind
Mm.
of support required to be able to break that intergenerational trauma, which is when we really feel that the cycle of poverty in a lot of ways is broken.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
yes.
No, go ahead. Complete this, Jithin. I don't want to stop you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Fair enough. Okay. Cool. So the final project that we are actually working on at this point of time is the affordable housing part of this, which is basically that children who are by 28, they're earning reasonably well. They're earning 20 to 30,000, if not 40,000 rupees a month. But the challenge is that because they don't have any assets, their parents don't have any assets. Majority of their income is directly going into rent, and they will never have any assets in their name. So, which means that it becomes they have some kind of a crisis. They need some way to invest in themselves. They don't have access to the regular financial systems like a regular bank or any of those kind of things. So now we are basically working on this program where we're trying to build a interest-free loan fund for children coming out of the program, who will be able to then set up their own houses and own their own first house. So by 28, 29, a big chunk of their salary is going towards an investment towards their future than their own. So that's something so we have had our first youth who's come out of the program, who's built their own house and owns their own house. And we feel that it is a very important step in the trajectory of the child, because when you're trying to break the cycle of poverty, it might be too difficult to break it for their parents. But if you're able to support the children, we can ensure that they are able to pull their parents out of poverty and able to start supporting them, and they end the cycle of poverty for their generation. And that's really been the priority that we are focusing on as an organization.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's so well thought through as a model and so insightful, Jitin. I want to ask you, so are there other examples of such models that you've had learnings from? Is this all learning by doing? How did you develop? This is so insightful. It is so well thought through as a model. How did you develop this learning, understanding, this framework?
So I started volunteering and supporting a group of 12 boys back in 2006 when we started MAD, and at that I still work with them. I grew up with them in a lot of ways. I was 19 years old; they were 12 years old, and every year I was, when I was mentoring them and I was working with them, I could see what are the challenges. And initially it was just English, but then we could see all the other challenges that they were facing at different stages of their life. Today many of them are married, some of them have children. Just being with them through that process really helped us understand. There were 12 of them, really helped us understand where the gaps were, where the breakages were. So that predominantly, that's something that has affected the development of the model on one side. But there's also the other side, which is we are a 100% volunteer run organization, which is we are a community based organization, which means that all the work that we do today, we work in 23 cities across 60 childcare institutions. And what we do is we build communities around the children to support them, and that work is something that we were able to develop, or because what we realize is that the kind of intervention that is required to really break children out of poverty in a single generation, um, you cannot be doing it through schools, and there is no infrastructure to deliver that kind of a high touch support for
Yeah.
children. So we realized, okay, there's a need for it, so we need to build that from, I wouldn't say scratch. Volunteering always existed, but what we do is something slightly different, which is community based care, where we're able to mobilize the community to take ownership of the children in their community for a long term.
Yeah, and the model is so deep and so mentoring led, right? I mean, nowadays, at least in the startup world and the commercial world, everything is about scalability, right? And when you look at
Yes.
India, you talk about 1.2 billion people, if not more, right? More than 50% of them don't have access to sanitation, pure drinking water. So the numbers are staggering, right? I mean, they're mammoth. It's almost like the whole country needs to be lifted up. It's not that some of us need to be lifted up. So, what are the challenges on scalability, and how have you thought through the scalability piece on this?
So this is why we decided to choose this community-based model, because the community-based model is actually extremely scalable. We actually scaled very early in our journey. By 2006, we started as an organization. By 2012, we were already in 23 cities, which is the cities that we are operating in right now. In 2012, we stopped scaling because we realized our priority should be more on the programmatic side than on the scale side, because scale is a lot more easier compared to the program development that we need, and that we needed to do to kind of break the cycle of poverty. By 2021, we became a lot more confident about the fact that, okay, we now have the necessary programs that is required to be able to break the cycle of poverty. Now let's focus back into scaling again. So now we slowly started focusing back into scaling, and from a scaling perspective, the numbers are huge, and the best answer to this is that uh, because the numbers are huge, we cannot have a centralized model for
Yeah,
support anymore. And the community-based approach is something that actually decentralizes care. The good news is that for every 200 children that is in a community that is in need of care and protection, there are at least 20,000 people who are living around it who are actually capable of providing that level of care and support the child requires. So even at a very global level or a national level, these numbers look very crazy, which is, there are numbers ranging from 25 million children to 150 million children who are in need of care and protection, who are vulnerable. But in a country which has, close to a billion people. So how do you kind of break it down into pieces where people in the local community, they're still not in an urban environment, we're still not in a space where uh, there are more children in need than people who are able to provide that. What people
Yeah.
really need is a platform where they can actually identify the children who are in need in my locality, and is able to support them in a way where I am able to that fits into my ability to support. And as long as you're able to create that, we're able to solve the problem, and in a piecemeal manner. So that's really what Make a Difference is trying to do, which is it is building a platform for young people around the country to actually step up and take ownership of the children in their local community and resolve it at their level itself. And we've been doing it
Yeah.
for now some 15 years. So now we know that this is across 23 cities. So we know that doing it in multiple cities with thousands of people is not a challenge. Now, how do we figure it out for a million? Is where it's the next
Yeah.
challenge that we are kind of approaching.
Yeah. And switching gears a bit, Jitin, I want to discuss with you. You work a lot with young people, as you said, right? I mean, Gen Z, as they're popularly called in our world, right? And there are all kinds of understanding insights about Gen Z, right? That yes, they do want purpose. They are conscious of their environment and they want to leave behind a better world. But they also want stability. They also want money. If you look at average kind of time spent in a job for Gen Z would be 2.5 years, at least on our side, right? And it's also a lot driven by growth, money, stability, etc. uh, what have you learned working with Gen Z? I mean, what are your insights? How do you navigate them? How do you manage them?
So yeah, it's been quite an exciting experience working. We earlier had a predominantly millennial demography who was working with us. Our average people who are about between the age of 18 to 25 are the people who predominantly were volunteer or making a difference. And now that from that predominantly millennial population, now we have a predominantly Gen Z population. And I think what I'm really loving the Gen Z. Zs who are coming on board, we feel there is a fundamental shift in a lot of cultural components. But I think one that really stood out for us recently was the need for authenticity,
Hmm.
need for things to be real. I think uh, they more than the millennials have really caught on to this idea that everything can be faked and everything can be made into a fad. Probably body positivity started off as a very genuine movement, but it can easily be co-opted, uh, and made into something to sell you things, or let it be the environmental movement at this point of time, right? Like, or let it be any of these things. So they are very wary of people who are like who have an agenda, and they are looking for people who are actually authentic. When I was kind of like also trying to understand who are the celebrities that they love and they respect and all this stuff, celebrities have really lost their like I, I remember when I was younger, we hear stories about celebrities being so huge that when somebody dies, people commit suicide. There was like a cult following in a lot of ways. Today, like when I speak to a young person about celebrities, they're like, yeah, these are people who are not particularly that educated. I really don't understand why they would give any opinions about what's going on in the world. And when they give those opinions, I understand that it's fundamentally, like they are they are so wrong about it that they get a backlash for it, and then they stop talking about it. So it's very interesting to see the people that they're following are a lot more authentic, a lot more real, and the need for authenticity was really standing out for me last time I was kind of engaging with them.
Interesting. Very, very fascinating. Very, very real and very deep insight there, Jitin. Jitin, in our world, when we're building brands, companies, right, one of the bigger constructs is the idea of purpose, right? So I mean, there are enough studies to say that brands which have a certain sense of purpose, they do much better commercially as well, with people, because beyond a point, I mean, nobody wakes up, my whole thing is that nobody wakes up in the morning saying, oh, let me brush my teeth with Colgate or Pepsodent, right? I mean, people go around their lives, they have issues, they have problems, they have opportunity, they have things to deal with. In that course of life, they collide with brands, right? And therefore brands need to be a part of that life, not just saying buy me all the time. And therefore, the whole idea of purpose. And but even with purpose, we say that purpose should navigate through your area of delivery. You should be able to do something about it. You should be able to act around it. Just saying something and just maybe making an ad is not purpose enough, right? So there's a lot of work in our business around purpose. And like any trend, there's also a counter trend of saying there's so much of woke washing happening around purpose. Brands are talking about things that they have nothing to do about, or they can't solve it. So for example, if you're a jewelry brand, what what job do you have trying to solve a India Pakistan conflict? Stay away, right? I mean, you help create marriages at best. So that has emerged as well. So I want to talk to you because I mean, you're running an organization which is all about purpose, right? I mean, commerce is at best a sustainable angle to it. So, A, how do you see the idea of purpose, and how has it helped you build a sustainable setup, both in terms of, say, funding, finance, commerce, and attracting stakeholders, partners around the idea of purpose?
So yes, purpose is really at the center of the work we do, and that's why uh, it was kind of in a lot of ways your power is defined by the responsibility that you're willing to carry, and it's not just for you as an individual, but for you as an organization also, and that's where then we decided as an organization that what we want to do is to make extreme poverty extinct in our lifetime. What we
Yeah,
were really doing was we were having a vision for our generation, which is that we have been handed over a world in a particular manner, and there is a lot of conversations even in the Gen Z at this point of time about what a terrible job has happened. It's almost like
yeah,
when the first campaign that Mad had when back in 2006 was the adults are screwed up. It's up to us now. So there was and that has only intensified with the current generation, where there is a very clear understanding that the world that's been handed over to us is subpar from the world that they received. So there is a strong sense of feeling amongst the Gen Zs or the volunteers that we work with about what should our legacy be. Well, what kind of world do we hand over to our children, and can we take ownership of that? So that's been a pretty strong narrative that's really driving all of us to say, and making sense of the pain and the suffering that we are seeing around us. And so purpose also plays that role, which is that, I'm in Bombay. When I walk outside, I see all this. I see children begging. I see people, having mental breakdowns on the streets, and many times feel helpless. But the purpose that we have, and as an organization, says that we fine, but we are doing something about it, and we need to keep going at it to some extent. Uh, but the third angle of purpose that we were able to kind of that we are noticing in the organization is so we just finished our leadership circle, which is where we bring
mm,
in around 350 of our community leaders. Out of the 3,500 community volunteers we have 350 community leaders who lead them, who are all volunteers themselves, but they are, their role is a lot more of the leadership of keeping these communities running. So all 350 people came together last week, and the objective of this the leadership circle is to transition. It's a transformation process where they transform from a community volunteer to a community leader, where you take ownership of the 200 children in their community and is ready to commit to their results, their outcomes. And so one of the important questions we ask them is, what is their purpose in life that's emerging? And these are 21, 22-year-old kids, and sometimes it's a very heavy question to ask.
yeah.
But when we ask this question, and everybody's sharing in their own circles, and then we try to kind of collectivize, bring in, do some sense making to kind of figure out what is really coming out, what is the collective purpose that we're all working towards. And I was just so surprised and happy to hear. But then what is really coming was that somehow people have clocked on to this idea that, so the purpose that they spoke about is that we want to build a world where human beings are kinder to each other.
Oh my God.
And that was very powerful,
Yeah,
because if like what people were connecting to is that somewhere the generation has kind of figured out that the problem is us. Like, it's
yeah.
not like the environment is making our life difficult, or there's some wild animal out there that's trying to make our life difficult. The predators, the biggest predator for one human being is another human being. And
Mm,
we have built this broad spectrum of you know, mindsets so that we are able to continue hurting people around us. Let it be our mates, let it be the delivery boys, let it be people in the streets. We are all contributing towards it, and we are very aware of it. So, uh, like, so getting past that and creating a world where people are a lot more kinder to each other, becoming the central purpose in people's lives has also been like something that's kind of emerging. But not going to just bring it back all back to mad. Um, we use purpose from this space, which is that because as a young person, there are three things that they're really looking for. Number one is a sense of purpose, a sense of direction in life. Number two is some agency, being able to do something with my life.
Yeah.
Because all my life I've been told that I'm not, all I can do is somebody will come and tell me things. Let it be school, let it be
Yeah.
college. I'll be lectured to. I cannot do anything. So, but to be told that you can actually do something about it and give you agency for the same, and to be able to find your community, to find your collective, to find your tribe who are similar to you. So these three are like big needs of our volunteers, and make a difference is directly delivering these. It's not like a
Yeah.
Coca-Cola in advertisement where it's like we're delivering happiness, but like these. So we really focus on delivering these three components for our volunteers, and I feel that you need all of these three things for purpose to actually, it's purpose in action, right? It's not just an
Yeah.
idea, but it's about like I'm able to act on it with a collective, and hence I feel it is believable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how we've used it mostly for
Yeah.
volunteers. For funders, it's just impact. As long as we deliver impact, they're happy. So it's cool.
Hmm. That's a fantastic model of saying, what can I do, and a sense of agency and collectivism that I'm amongst my tribe and together we are making the difference. I think it's a fantastic model for purpose. I want to talk to you a bit about the commercial angle of. I mean, finally you have to run something which is sustainable. You know, so talk to us about what's the model really. I mean, is it largely funding led? Are you How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a for profit sustainable organization? What's really the thinking there?
We see ourselves as a product company, and it's in a very different
Okay.
way. What is a product company? Which is that if you have a good enough product, somebody
Yeah.
will be willing to buy it, and
Yeah.
as long as people are willing to buy it, you're sustainable. That's the idea,
Mm.
right? Like, toothpaste, I don't want to make it by myself. I'm not the best person to make toothpaste, so I will trust Colgate. And as long as there is, I need my mouth clean, Colgate will always is a sustainable business. It's the exact same in the social change place, which is that people are genuinely affected by the problems around the world. Like people want to do something about it, but they
Yeah.
actually don't know how they can contribute. So the product that we are actually selling is that, hey, if you're affected by these problems, if you're affected by extreme poverty in your community, you can do something about it. Number one, you can volunteer. Here's a platform. Step in and volunteer. But if you don't have the time to volunteer, you can actually fund the initiative. So we don't see it as like somebody is giving something for free and not getting anything in return. Azim Premji used to fund us. The reason he funds
Yeah.
us is because he genuinely wants to make the world a better place. He doesn't know how to make the world a better place directly. So he invests in people who he believes is the best at making the world a
Yeah.
better place. So that way, from a funding point of view, we are pretty straightforward, which is we have a solid product that works, and as long as we have a functional product, there'll always be people to fund us. So we don't need to worry about not being sustainable in any real way. That's one part of it. The second part of it is from the angle of where is your money coming from. So today, out of the beneficiary cost that is there in the organization, we have three types of cost. One is the beneficiary cost, which is the cost that directly goes to the child. Second is the community cost, the cost that is required to keep the community active so they're able to support the children on a regular basis for the 18-year time period. And finally, the org cost, which is the cost like my salary, designing programs, monitoring and evaluation, technology, branding, any of those kind of stuff. So our org cost is actually the smallest, and the other two
Mm.
are form around 70 to 80%, 70%, 70 to 80% of the overall cost. Today, around 60% of our beneficiary cost is raised at the local community itself, which is that people who are
Wow.
living around the childcare institution itself see the work and they contribute small amounts of money. Normally, it's like 500 rupees on a monthly basis, 1,000 rupees on a monthly basis, but it does add up quite fast.
Mm.
So around 60% is now beneficiary cost is being managed at the local level, and our intention is to kind of get that up to 100% of the beneficiary cost, and if possible, the community cost. So then
Wow.
what that leaves us with is the just the org cost, which then is significantly lower, which can easily be met using, there are HNIs who fund us.
Yeah.
Rohini Nilkani is one of our funders. We have eClerks, which is a CSR, it's a tech company who does CSR with us. They are actually funding us. So
Yeah.
then, the organization funding, you can have a broad spectrum of funders, which is HNI, CSR, which is corporates, foundations like Omedia is a foundation,
Yeah.
organizations like that. That's how we kind of take care of, manage our risks to some extent.
Yeah. Amazing. Fantastic. On technology piece, Jitin, right? I mean, there's so much of technology happening every day, and we are all firm believers of using technology to solve scalable problems, right? Now, a lot of that application is obviously on the business side, on say UPI or uh, hire a car, mobility, etc., etc. There's a lot of tech also coming in education, right? In some ways in the right place, in some ways perhaps at the wrong place as well, because some of it is again going back to getting you to prepare for IIT, JEE, and so on and so forth. Uh, but how do you see the role of technology? Because some part of your product is education. A large part is also other community and soft skills and support. Do you feel that technology can help you scale? Are you using it in any way? Do you see a future there at all?
Oh, absolutely. Like the current MAD model would not be scalable if not for technology, because there
Hmm.
is the fundamental challenge, and it's not so much in the education space than in the organizing space.
Hmm.
Because the fundamental challenge is not content. Content is there everywhere, but if content is all we needed to uh, you know get children out of poverty, this problem would have been solved long back. The moment YouTube came, we would be able to solve this problem.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot more like, so. What we need is a high touch support system that will be able
Yeah.
to enable children through the whole process, right? Because at different stages, they need different level of support, and uh, to organize people to be able to provide. And there are people out there who are ready to provide that support. Number one, there are people out there who's ready to provide the resources to provide that support. The only challenge is people who are like, there might be at least 2 to 3 childcare institutions in 5 kilometer radius where all of us are living, but we don't even know where they are. We don't know what the truth of those children are. We don't know what the needs of those children are. We don't have a relationship with any of them. So it's an organizing challenge more than an education challenge. And from an organizing perspective, a lot of new technology is now coming in that is enabling us to kind of organize people a lot better. On one side, definitely there is social media and all those things which kind of enables us to communicate with people and connect people a lot more faster into the organization. That's one big. So social media is definitely contributing a lot to the from a scaling perspective, but also a lot of this ERP systems that's now coming up, which is enabling us to track the child for an 18-year time period,
Hmm.
attach different volunteers at different periods of time, ensuring that they are able to raise funds in a way in an extremely visible manner. So there's a lot of technology that's happening at that level, making our recruitment systems a lot more automated with AI. By using AI in the recruitment process. Um,
Wow.
so there is so at an organizing level, it's at the end of the day, there are a lot of ERP systems for large scale tech companies or large scale multinational companies, but yes, we are right now in the process of developing an ERP system for a movement. So if you're building a movement, what kind of an ERP system do you want? And
Yeah.
the good news is we started doing this back in 2010 with our own internal technology, because there's very little in the market. But now there's so much of the shelf tools available that we are so surprised that they're all integrating with each other so well that we kind of feel that a lot of our needs will actually be met by just integrating a lot of these tools together itself.
Yeah. Amazing. And if you were to look back, and or even at this point in time, what do you think have been your biggest challenges, or what is your biggest challenge, top one or top two, that you think that you live with, that keeps you worried at night, if at all? And with the work that you're doing, I'm sure you're getting a peaceful sleep.
It's actually been the pandemic really was an eye-opening experience, and it has for a lot of us. So what happened is that during the pandemic, within the first 2 weeks, the government decided that they want to send the children back home because they don't want to take responsibility of children in childcare
Yeah.
institutions. But these children are in a childcare institution for a reason, because their homes are not safe.
Yeah.
And the moment they were sent back home, like within the first 2 weeks, we had our first boy who was hacked to death by his father.
Oh my God.
We had so many children who were either getting married off, where we needed to intervene, who were getting into child labor. What really became clear to us is that when a pandemic happens, for the poorest of the poor, there is going to be no
Yeah.
one for them. Even
Yeah.
like, and that is the time when they need a support system the most. So
Yeah.
that was a big realization, which is that truly realize, like, all of us would have really experienced care from our community during the pandemic, and we were grateful that we had the support system and all of this kind of stuff. They don't have that support system, and without that support system in a crisis, it's a spiral. That was a big realization. Second big realization was that uh, we could also see all of the children that we work with, when they experience some kind of a challenge and they were able to reach out to us, or we were able to understand, suddenly the entire community at Make a Difference level was able to come together and support the child. So there wasn't a single child who did not get supported once they reached out in the MAD community. So
Mm.
that's when the power of the community became a lot more clearer. We had one of
Yeah.
our stories where when a bunch of our children who were HIV positive, who were living in a paying guest, and the pandemic started, and everybody kicked them out of everybody kicked people out of paying guests, and these children have nowhere to go,
Mm.
and they were stuck inside a red zone, and they are HIV positive, which means that they are much more susceptible to all of this stuff, and they did not know where to go. We were not sure what will happen. We put it out in our community, and within like next 3-4 hours, our volunteers and their families welcomed them into their own homes at
Wow.
the heights of the pandemic, right? Like, so, and this is something that everybody realizes, which is that, like during the pandemic, like the average Joe is really ready to come forward and support and provide support to children. So that was like a very positive experience also. And the third component, these three things that's kind of when they come together, is where the stress to some extent comes. Which is the third part is my work. My wife works in the agriculture, in the farming, in the environment space, and like she keeps sharing these results, which basically talks about how the environment, we have crossed a particular threshold, and the global south is only going to experience more and more, like extreme scenarios
Mm.
going forward, where like the number is that internally we genuinely believe that in another 6 years there is going to be another pandemic like event that is
Mm.
going to happen, right?
Mm.
And we know, if there is anything that we know, just that when that happens, the centralized support systems will all drop the
Yeah.
ball, and the
Yeah.
community will need to pick it up. And
Yeah.
the good news is that we have built a model where the community can actually pick up and
Yeah.
support the children when they need to. So the pressure on us right now is that how do we make MAT scalable? How do we make it into a model that when the centralized systems fail, the decentralized systems are immediately able to pick it up and provide that social protection system that children need at that point of time. And that could, in a lot of ways, be a transfer of power in a lot of ways back to the people,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
taking full ownership of their children, which makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
that's the challenge, and that is kind of keeping all of us up
Yeah.
late, yeah,
Yeah.
and waking up with
No.
anxiety.
No, absolutely. I mean, if we may relate to what we went through as an organization, and we are a commercial organization, but exactly similar. In fact, we built a platform where top 50 of our leaders, we come together every Tuesday for half an hour, and we discuss what's going on and what to do. And the whole organization is being led by people, not by leaders. And to my mind, that's the core of success of the organization, because everybody's owned. I mean, it's not led by me or my partner. It's led by people themselves, and that has made all the difference. That one thing has made all the difference to where we are now. When you sit back and you look at next 5 years, right? You've obviously made a lot of difference, Jitin, and it's so fantastic to talk to you about all of this. From eradicating poverty through meaningful education, right now 360 goal, all the way to helping them invest in an asset and own an asset, right? So you've really thought this through. Their milestones, strategic milestones, is a product, as you say, behind all this. What do you look at next 5 years as? Where does that head in your mind?
The last 2 years, after the pandemic, we really sat down and thought about what is the role of MAD in this new world that is emerging post pandemic. Not just post pandemic, but also we had finished our programmatic design to some extent. So now that is something that is ready. So what is our role in the larger world? And what came to us in some way was the story of this man who is sunbathing by the river, and he looks, and suddenly he sees a child drowning in the river, and he gets up, he's concerned, he jumps in without even thinking about himself, saves the child, puts the child back on the on the shores, and feeling, I'm glad we were able to make a difference in this, and I'm so glad I was here. But then suddenly he hears screams at the back, we look back, and we see more and more, like another two more children actually drowning, and he jumps back in, saves the children, puts them back, and he's feeling, wow, what an amazing day. I was able to save three children's lives. It's great. And look back, and suddenly he's hearing more and more children just coming
Yeah.
down the river. And he's like, okay, fine, I won't be able to save everybody, but I will do my best. And he's just jumping back and trying to save as many children as possible, really struggling, really suffering, but, not stopping, right? Like, and not stopping and thinking. And many ways, we felt like, that is the space where a lot of organizations are, especially at the pandemic, where you're kind of like struggling to kind of figure out, like, the quantum of challenges are kind of overwhelming us. And the question that we kind of asked that person was that, but hey, can you just pause for a second and walk upstream to find out why are so many children ending up
Mm,
in the stream? Who's throwing all these children into water,
mm,
right? Like,
mm,
why? What is? And can you stop that person? Can you just can that be the role that you play, and will that actually have a bigger impact than, I know, directly going there, saving children, feeding people on a daily basis, feeding dogs on the streets, donating your old clothes, planting trees. These are all like great, beautiful activities which actually makes us feel better, for sure. But are we as individuals looking at it from a perspective of how do we solve the problem at its root cause? And
yeah.
so the swimming upstream, going upstream was like a very important narrative that we had, because for us, what we realized that at the end of the day, why are children in childcare institutions in the first place, right?
Mm,
Uh, because at the end of the day, a child is supposed to grow up in a family, not in a childcare institution. So instead of MAD trying to create the best experience for children inside childcare institutions, or if we only focus on that, we will actually cause more problem by
yeah.
bringing, more parents will end up putting up children in childcare institutions because it's a better
Yeah.
future for them, right?
Yeah.
So, how do we kind of work around that? So, we are actively now looking at how do we build our volunteering model in such a way that the core problem that Matt solved in a childcare institution was, for every 40 children in the childcare institution, there were only, the government mandated numbers, there should be three caregivers. And
Mm,
that's not enough. Imagine growing up in a family where you had 40 siblings and you had two
yeah.
parents taking care of the 40 siblings. It's just, human beings are not meant for that kind of ratios.
Yeah.
So what Matt did was, we realized that you cannot have a paid model where we can hire 40 caregivers for 40 children, or even 20 caregivers for 40 children. But what we can is, we can identify people who genuinely care about the child, and ensure that they are able to provide uninterrupted care on a weekly basis for the 18-year time period, through by working with the community. So we were able to drastically reduce the uh, the caregiver to child ratio. The same challenge is something that we're hoping to tackle in the family-based care model, which is basically where many a times children who are brought in front of CWC, Child Welfare Committee, uh, because their families are not safe for the child, is not because the parents are not capable of taking care of the children, but they are facing some kind of a family crisis.
Mm,
And if with a little bit of support from the government, the child can actually stay back in the family itself and be supported. But the problem is that the caseworker model is broken here, which is because now the child is a government's responsibility. The government needs to ensure the child is safe. So some caseworker needs to keep going in and checking on the child to ensure that the volunteer, the child is getting the support, the child is still safe or not. And the government just does not have enough caseworkers to be able to go and do this at a family-based care model. So that model itself is not available. We are hoping that we can work with the government to provide volunteers from the community itself to be those caseworkers, so that the
Mm,
volunteers can not just provide casework support but also deliver the support Matt is currently providing in a childcare institution at the house itself with the family itself. So that's something that we are really exploring, that we are
interesting.
quite keen on actively.
Yeah.
And there's one more final element, which is that it's even it all of this is still at the protection level, where the child has already experienced some kind of trauma at the family level. What can we do before the family level itself, before the child even experiences? What can we do from a prevention point of view? And
Mm,
that's where community-based care really comes in, where there are thousands of government schemes that's available. That is where, like the challenge is not with the government schemes but the accessibility of these schemes. And
mm,
because of a lot of reasons, right from illiteracy to lack of clarity and all those kind of stuff. But now there's a tech tool called Hak Darshak, which is basically, if you go in to a community and just enter the details of somebody, they will actually be able to get all the government schemes that they are eligible for, and help and figure out how exactly they can apply for them
wow.
and get it clear. Now this again are great places where people from the community, volunteers, young people like us, can go into the community and ensure that the government social protection system that's currently in place is fully implemented. And that implementation is currently at like under 10% for many schemes. How to get it up to 90%, so that we are able to provide support to the families early on itself, so that the family does not need to go into that kind of a state. So this is really the direction that we're going. So
Yeah.
really, the missing link is the community, which is that
Yeah.
uh, to deliver all of these components, we need to activate the community. And there should be a community layer that cares for the child and takes ownership of the child. And building that community layer across the country is really the priority that we have as an organization at this point of time.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, and it's just so well thought through, Jitin. I'm so inspired with this conversation. Right? What I mean, as we come to the end of our conversation, what advice would you give to today's entrepreneurs? To I mean, obviously, it's very easy in today's shiny world to get excited about startups, tech-based startup. I mean, there's so many of us going from one funding to the other and so on and so forth, and the race to unicorn, it looks like a never ending race. I mean, you've not only built a sustainable setup, it's also sustainable growth setup, right? Doing something good. What are a couple of pieces of advice from your life learnings, your failures, your learnings you could give to a lot of young people who are listening to us right now?
Yeah, no, for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I see an entrepreneur as a problem solver, somebody who's actually solving a problem, and not solving your problem, but somebody else's problem. Like one way to say it is, yes, the problem is that I don't have enough money, and I want to be an entrepreneur so that I make money. That's one way to look at it, but that's not really the angle that I'm looking at. I feel like there is no existing problem that bothers you that you want to solve. Then don't become an entrepreneur. Just there are other people who are already figured out how to solve these problems. Join them and help them solve it. But if you are out there, as like, find meaningful problems that's worth solving. My biggest advice will be, like, don't make you know don't make another soap company, don't make another jewelry company. These are not problems that we as a species is facing at this point of time. Solve something that's worthy of solving, and that's really where your purpose, then your purpose kicks in. Everybody just becomes so much more easier for the organization to raise funds, to energize the employee base. When I was young, when I was like in fifth standard or sixth standard, when they taught the independence movement in social studies, I always was like, damn it, I missed that time. I wish I was born during the independence movement with all the Subhash Chandra Bose and all these cool people. I could also have, like, contributed and be part of the movement, and helped India in its independence. Like I'm born in a time where there are no such movements anymore. There are no such problems anymore. While now I'm like, oh my god, like we have all the problems. Like, we are not living in a, like, if you look around, I don't want to go into stats, but if you look around, the world is burning around us. People are
Yeah.
suffering around us, and it is unnecessary. And when there are these real problems that is out there, we want the best minds to be able to focus on those and find solutions for it. There is no, all the problems are not solved, but they can be solved, and they can be solved in our lifetime. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, which is, find a problem that's worth solving, and then keep at it, and you'll always find supporters who believe in that and will support you through the whole process. Success, failure wouldn't really matter.
Yeah. And your biggest learning as a leader, Jithin?
Because learning as a leader, culture is the toughest thing to maintain. I feel that the more I'm realizing is that uh, your culture is fundamentally dependent on how much of inner work you have done as a leader in the space. And people say culture eats strategy for breakfast, but most organizations don't drive uh, culture first. Primarily because of a dearth at the leadership level. Like, I would say my lack of capability as a leader is what is restricting my organization to be, to reach the epitome from a culture perspective. And as leaders, we have to really invest in our own inner work, our own development, so that we can actually build a culture that is that truly enables people to work together in a productive way in one sense, but in a truly collaborative way that actually solves problems. So yeah, investing in your own inner work is something that I'm learning.
Awesome. Such a fantastic conversation, Jitin. And at this stage in our podcast, we take a quick break. And when we come back, we switch the mic to you. So you get to ask me a few questions.
Amazing. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because we're talking so much about scalability, scale readiness, and branding and marketing, all of this actually plays a critical role in all of this stuff. The intersection that I saw was around movement building, which is that the kind of scale that we're talking about, just couple of not couple like 10 to 20 or 30 or 100 million people. It doesn't reach through an organization model, but more like through a movement model. So I was very curious to kind of understand your thoughts on, do you believe movements are possible in today's world? Is there any movements that you have been inspired by? And more importantly, like your thoughts on, like I would love to hear your thoughts on, MAD as an organization, if we are trying to build a movement, what are some of the things that we should probably consider based on your experience so far?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think movements happen, and there are a couple of important criteria for it to exist before movements happen, right? One is obviously a shared purpose, right, or a shared mission, or a shared problem that everybody feels so strongly about that they want to move to action to solve, whichever way you might call it. But that's one of the biggest ingredients for any movement to get kick-started, right? That's what. But that by itself is not enough, because you could communicate or leave a huge purpose, and people may nod, and yet they may not move to action, right? And that happens all the time, and happens in such a huge way that, as communication professionals, we are scratching our head, what went wrong. And that brings me to the second most important aspect of movement, which is simplicity of action, right? How are you making it so simple for me, so simple for me? Because you have to also understand, while mentally as human beings, we are empathetic and we want to leave behind a better world, all of us want to, but at the same time, the counter to that is that we are lazy, right? Human beings are lazy. We don't want to move a finger. We don't want to go beyond our comfort zone to do anything. We don't want to go out of our comfort zone to do things for ourselves. So then, to do something which is not in my first degree of impact, at least immediately, it gets difficult. So to our mind, it's very important to reduce the purpose to a very simple, actionable ritual or an action. Look at Gandhi, and he's to my mind the biggest marketer, so to say. I mean, the rituals that he created of, I mean, that at home you can make thread simple, or just go and touch salt, done, right? So you have to build very simple, executable, low effort actionables and rituals that people can make happen, right? For example, we run this program called Siksha for Procter and Gamble, and from all the money that you spend buying your shampoo, soaps, etc., through Procter and Gamble, I mean, some part of that proceed goes to making schools, right? And when people feel happy that without making an effort, just by washing my hair or using a sanitary napkin, right, I contributed to something better, right? So people want to do it, but we have to make it easy for them, right? And the third thing, is something that you pointed out as well, Jitin, is the proof that this is real, that this is authentic, that you're not. I mean, there's so much of suspicion of the world around us today. That are you doing it for a selfish purpose? Are you woke washing? Are you plowing this back to your profit? Right. So that degree of authenticity, that degree of transparency, right? To say that have those schools been built? Right? Do they have teachers? Are kids coming? And so on and so forth. So that is so important. The impact and the authenticity of impact is so important. So I would say those are the three big pillars. One is having a purpose, a shared purpose. That purpose obviously needs to be communicated. I mean, very few people go out and search for it, right? So you have to come, and I mean, it has to float on my timelines, right? I mean, a new T-shirt is floating on my timeline, a new makeup is floating on my timeline, a new gadget is floating on my timeline, right? They're pushing me to upgrade every 12 months, 18 months. I am in an upgrade cycle of consumption, right? I can be. I mean, emotionally, I want to be in the upgrade cycle of life as well, but it has to float. I will not make that effort. That communication has to come to me, right? That's one. Second is make it easy for me to act on it, right? Convert it into bite-sized pieces. Like long time back, I did some work on India tourism. And it's just an analogy. When it comes to India tourism, we make everything so complex. Oh, India is so complex. You can't understand India in 1 week. It needs 1 month. Nobody wants to come, right? It has to become bite-sized, it has to become usable. Don't make it complicated and complex. And third, obviously, is authenticity and impact. I would say those are three big ingredients of any movement being successful.
That makes so much sense, and I feel like the more listening to you, probably the one area where we need to work on or think about a little bit more is the space where an average volunteer of ours has to spend at least 10 hours on a weekly basis for a minimum of 1 year to
Yeah.
really do the job. And what can we do there? What are the kind of optimizations that we
Yeah.
can bring about there so that more people can be involved is something that I'm taking
Yes.
away
Yeah.
from this conversation. Can I ask one or two more questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just because you engage with so many brands and so many people from that spectrum. I was kind of I felt that the resistance to change is coming from leadership. That has been always my understanding of the space, which is why are there no better people management, people practices, even though there are amazing people practices. That is, that people have already figured out better people practices, but it's not kind of happening in a company because there's a lack of leadership that is willing to do that. And the same with regards to even the level of sustainability that the organization is in. There are companies who are already setting standards for how to cause less harm to the in your supply chain, to the people that are working with you, the products that you are building. It's not a lack of ideas anymore on how to
Yeah.
make the world a better place by running a company.
Yeah.
But I've not always found the similar thing, and my exposure to leaders are actually very limited. Just one from your understanding, do you see a trend? Do you see corporate leaders actively thinking about it from an authentic space? Not because okay now there is this external pressure because of which all of this is going to
Yeah.
happen, but from an authentic
Yeah.
space, I want to do this better. Have you noticed that in your thing? One or
Yeah.
two examples. I'm very
Yeah.
curious to just understand that trend.
Yeah.
Right?
No, definitely. I think there's a lot of thinking now, Jitin, on saying that how. I mean, for example, we just won a Grand Prix at Cannes, and the category we won is sustainable business goals, sustainable development goals, right? So even a platform such as Cannes now has a category around sustainable development goals, right? Because we're realizing that the world is not about immediate, quick fix, consumption led solutions. So the one line answer to your question is that yes, sustainability, doing things the right way, causing less harm to the world is top of agenda for a lot of companies right now. I mean, the companies that we work with, Procter and Gamble, now Pepsi, etc. I mean, this is being taken very, very seriously, right? So it's top of agenda. But I have to at the same time tell you that uh, again, as much as there's intent and there's desire and there's need, these are also commercial organizations. They have extreme business pressures. I mean, you've just been through pandemic. You don't want to cause redundancy, right? And you're always in the pressure of reducing costs, increasing top line, and so on and so forth. And I'll go back to the previous answer where I said that as a community, we also need to make it easier for the business leaders to be able to participate in this world. Currently, it is so hard and everything is so recessed that it's just so difficult. I mean, everybody wants to contribute, but nobody knows where to start. That, to my mind, is a huge gap, right? uh, and I feel that there's a solve that is required there. A solve it bridges the corporate world's needs and desires to be more responsible, to build a better world, and all the organizations like yourselves where the real action is happening. But there's no bridge, there's no easy bridge there, right? So, I mean, for example, we just did a huge piece of initiative with Whisper and PNG, where we're bringing the chapter on menstruation hygiene in schools, right? So that's not being taught. And where else can it be taught? I mean, it's a cultural taboo. It won't be taken up at homes. And the biggest initiative, therefore, is to bring it in school curriculum, right? And it's been received so well, right? And we are backing it in a huge way. PNG is backing it in a huge way. Whisper is backing in a huge way. So there's obviously intent and desire, but as I said, right, the bridge is what is missing right now.
Oh, absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense because uh, when you the example that you just gave, which is that businesses now have become such a huge player in the space that when they decide to change something, things actually change. So
Yeah,
there is so much power that vests in the space, and the value that probably like somebody from the social sector can offer is that currently probably that doesn't exist so much in in the sector is that uh, I'm engaging with the stakeholder on a day-to-day basis and is
yeah,
able to understand the problem at a much more nuanced manner, which sometimes when somebody from the business space comes in, can it's very easy to look at the solution from like a very at a
yeah,
20,000 feet,
yeah,
and from that perspective, come with solutions which actually may not actually
yeah.
be functional, and
It
that
may
then
not
it
be
becomes a
sustainable.
negative. But
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And because now you are a business and you have so much power, I have also seen so many of these non-sustainable these things now being forced down upon people because
yeah,
they are, once it comes with that kind of like government backing, there's no way for the powerless in a lot of ways to resist it also,
yeah,
and hence this whole thing kind of panning out. So yeah, so I feel like we both have a role to play in this, and
yeah.
together is probably where the solution is
Yes.
going to be to some extent. But yeah, I thought thank you so much for your time so far.
Thank
It
you,
was
Jitin.
really a
Amazing.
pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, amazing conversation. Very, very inspired, right? And we must be able to do something together. For everybody who's been listening to us, right? If they want to know more about the work that you've been doing, and if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to connect with you and your organization?
I think the first thing you should probably attempt is to see if you know anybody from MAD in your community. There's a very good chance that you know a MAD volunteer in your extended community, and they are the best people to tell you what MAD is. But in case you're not able to find that person, then check out our website, makeadiff.in, 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 which kind of gives you a little bit of an understanding about what the work we do. Or you can definitely directly reach out to me. Email is the best way to get in touch with me, which is jithin at makeadiff.in. That is JITHIN at makeadiff.in. In Instagram, it is Jithin CN at Jithin CN, and LinkedIn, it's my name, Jithin C Nedumala. So these are all the ways that you can reach out to me, and hopefully we'll be able to connect.
Thank you, Jitin. Thanks a lot.